The story they tell children today about a brave toy soldier, a kind young girl, and a sparkling kingdom of sweets is one of Europe's quietest deceptions. The truth about the Nutcracker begins not in a cheerful theatre filled with twinkling lights, but in a continent scarred by cannon fire, hunger, and fear. Long before it became a holiday tradition, the tale was born in an age when children slept beside veterans who screamed in their dreams, when wooden toys were shaped like rifles and drums, when every family knew someone who never came home from war. What you are about to discover is not a harmless ballet. It is a coded memory of a society learning how to teach its children to love soldiers, admire obedience, and accept sacrifice. The evidence first appears in the strange original story written by E.T.A. Hoffmann in 1816, a writer famous for unsettling tales that blurred reality and nightmare. His Nutcracker was not charming. He was cracked, stiff, cursed, and surrounded by violence. Later, editors softened the horror. Translators rewrote scenes. Composers like Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky wrapped it in music so beautiful that audiences forgot the fear hiding beneath each note. To understand why this happened, we must step back into that vanished Europe, a world where stories were not written for joy but for survival. Imagine Europe in the years after Napoleon's armies fell silent. The snow still covered battlefields where thousands never received graves. Cities were crowded with veterans who had lost limbs, sight, or hope. Children grew up beside fathers who stared into empty space, beside mothers who sewed uniforms late into the night, beside cupboards that held less food each winter. This was the world that produced the first Nutcracker. In these years, toys were not innocent objects. Toy soldiers filled shop windows from Vienna to Berlin. Small wooden drums, tiny cannons, miniature cavalry sets appeared in nurseries across the continent. Parents told themselves these gifts were harmless, yet they were reminders of uniforms and discipline, of marching lines and shouted orders. The child learned early that courage meant standing still when told, that glory meant fighting someone else's war. Writers like E.T.A. Hoffmann lived inside this tension. He worked as a judge, a musician, a man surrounded by reports of crime and madness. His stories showed how fragile the human mind could become under pressure. When he wrote about Clara, about the toy soldier who came alive, he was speaking to a generation haunted by war memories that refused to fade. Later, when Alexandre Dumas retold the tale for younger readers, he removed much of the darkness. The harsh world faded into sugar and music, but the shadow of that older Europe still lives inside the story, waiting quietly beneath every Christmas performance. But here is where the record becomes unsettling. The Nutcracker, the handsome prince with polished boots and a shining crown, never existed in the original tale. He was invented later, shaped by translators and composers who feared what the first story revealed. In the version written by E.T.A. Hoffmann, the Nutcracker is not charming. He is grotesque. His jaw is cracked from biting too hard. His smile is frozen in pain. His body is stiff like a broken veteran forced back into uniform. Hoffmann's Clara does not dance through snow with carefree joy. She burns with fever. She slips between dream and nightmare. Toys do not sing. They march. The Mouse King does not play games. He threatens execution. Children whisper of punishment, of betrayal, of curses placed on families that disobey. This was a story soaked in anxiety, a warning told through fantasy. Imagine candlelight flickering against cracked plaster walls, a child clutching a wooden soldier while listening to adults speak of lost brothers and distant fronts. Hoffmann understood that children absorb fear long before they understand words. His story gave shape to that fear. It turned broken soldiers into toys. It turned nightmares into battles fought on bedroom floors. When later writers like Alexandre Dumas softened the tale, they replaced horror with sweetness. They removed sickness. They removed dread. They removed the memory of war. The monster became a prince. The warning became entertainment, and the truth began to disappear beneath snow, music, and polite applause. Now consider the Mouse King, because understanding him unlocks the hidden meaning of the story. To modern audiences, he looks like a cartoon villain with crowns and whiskers. In Hoffman's Europe, he represented something far more terrifying. Rats meant famine, rats meant disease, rats meant death moving silently through winter streets. Generations still remembered the Black Death. Cities feared outbreaks every year. Grain stores vanished overnight under gnawing teeth. Children were warned that rats carried sickness into beds and cradles. When Hoffmann wrote of a king of mice marching with an army, he was not inventing a monster. He was describing the fear that haunted every cellar and pantry. The Mouse King also carried political meaning. Invading armies were often compared to swarms of rats, devouring crops and homes. Children heard adults whisper about foreign soldiers taking bread and livestock. The enemy became a creature that multiplied without mercy. So when Clara's toys rise to fight the mice, the battle is not play. It is a rehearsal. A child watches soldiers defeat a plague, defeat invaders, defeat chaos itself. Victory becomes comforting. Obedience becomes heroic. And the lesson settles quietly into memory long before the child understands what war truly costs. But the transformation that buried the story's darker meaning did not come from writers alone. It came from music. When Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky composed the ballet in 1892, he wrapped Hoffmann's uneasy dream inside melodies so graceful that audiences forgot to question what they were watching. The battlefield became a dance, the curse became a romance, the broken soldier became a prince. The terror of mice in the dark became a playful march that children could hum on their way home. Music softened the nightmare until it felt safe to applaud. Think of the moment Clara enters the land of sweets. Sugar castles rise, candy spirits dance, snow falls in perfect rhythm. Yet this sweetness arrives only after a war is won, after an enemy is crushed, after obedience is rewarded with fantasy. The message hides inside beauty. Fight bravely, trust authority, and paradise will follow. This was the age of empires. Nations needed loyal citizens. They needed children who believed sacrifice led to glory. The Nutcracker became the perfect lesson. It taught fear, then comfort. It showed war, then reward. And each winter, under warm theatre lights, the memory of Europe's darkest century was dressed in silk and called tradition. To understand the deepest layer of the story, we must look at the object at its center. The Nutcracker doll was not invented for children. In German towns like Siphon, wooden nutcrackers were carved as grim soldiers and stern kings with wide mouths and sharp teeth. They were symbols of authority mocked in secret. Villagers cracked hard shells in their jaws while laughing at the rulers who taxed their harvests and sent sons to war. The doll's face was always severe, teeth bared, eyes staring forward. He looked like a guard who never blinked. In folk belief, nutcrackers also served as protectors. Placed near doors, they were meant to scare away evil spirits. A soldier carved from wood stood watch while families slept. When Hoffmann chose a nutcracker as his hero, he used an object loaded with meaning. It was a tool of survival. It broke shells so people could eat. It mocked authority. It guarded the home. And it looked like a soldier who could never rest. Later Christmas markets turned these figures into cheerful souvenirs. Bright paint replaced stern faces. Crowns became playful. But the shape remained. A silent reminder of hunger, of fear, of watchful nights when families prayed that no marching boots would echo down their street. Now consider Clara, because her role reveals the quiet purpose of the tale. In later ballets, she is a cheerful girl who dances through snow and candy kingdoms. In Hoffmann's first story, she is fragile, feverish, caught between dream and illness. She collapses after the battle. Adults whisper that she imagined everything. Her suffering is dismissed as childish fantasy. In 19th century Europe, children were expected to accept fear without protest. Many watched siblings die from sickness that doctors could not treat. Many listened to parents speak of debts, of conscription, of men taken away by officers. Clara represents the child who sees too much and is told to forget. When writers like Alexandre Dumas rewrote the tale, Clara's pain was softened, her fever vanished, her doubt disappeared. She became a symbol of innocence rewarded, yet the original lesson remained hidden. Trust the soldier, accept the battle, believe the authority that says everything will be fine. Clara is not only a heroine, she is the witness. Through her eyes, children learn to fear enemies, admire uniforms, and silence their questions. The Nutcracker protects her. He commands the toys, he defeats the mice, and the child learns that safety comes from obedience, not from asking why the war began. The final disguise of the story came from its setting. Christmas feels warm, safe, filled with candles and sweets. Yet this choice was deliberate. In the 19th century, Christmas was being reshaped into a family holiday across Europe. Writers like Charles Dickens turned it into a season of kindness, charity, and nostalgia. Governments and churches supported this image. A peaceful holiday could calm a restless public. Placing the Nutcracker inside Christmas did something powerful. It wrapped a story of war, fear, and discipline inside comfort. The battle happens beside a decorated tree. The curse breaks after gifts are opened. Violence hides behind ribbons and carols. Children learn the lesson while thinking they are celebrating. In Imperial Russia, theatres like the Mariinsky Theatre staged the ballet for noble families. Snow fell on painted sets while soldiers bowed gracefully. Parents applauded. Children watched heroes defeat enemies and return to a land of sweets. No one spoke about the real wars outside the theatre walls. Christmas made the message gentle. It turned obedience into tradition. It turned fear into nostalgia. And every winter, under candlelight and music, the story repeated itself, teaching loyalty without ever speaking the word aloud. When we examine the story as a whole, a chilling pattern emerges. The Nutcracker is not just a tale of magic or childhood wonder. It is a lesson in obedience disguised as entertainment. Each element reinforces hierarchy. The Nutcracker himself is a soldier, disciplined and unyielding. The mice represent disorder and rebellion, punished for challenging order. Clara observes, fragile and awed, absorbing the lesson without question. The story teaches that safety comes from trusting authority. Victory comes from following orders. Obedience is rewarded with beauty, with sweets, with the illusion of a safe world. Every pirouette, every marzipan mountain, every sparkling sugar castle carries a hidden message. The world is harsh, but those who follow the rules will survive and prosper. Those who do not are consumed, like the Mouse King's army once consumed by toys. Hoffmann knew this. He embedded fear and instruction in a narrative that could pass unnoticed. Later editors softened it, but the message remained intact beneath music and pageantry. Children cheered without realizing they were learning. Adults applauded without realizing they were complicit. The Nutcracker endures because it teaches silently, a tale of survival, discipline, and obedience wrapped in whimsy. It is a story that asks its audience to accept war, accept authority, and accept that happiness is granted, never earned. And that is why its original truth is so disturbing. Look closer at the dance itself. Every movement, every leap, every battle scene is a carefully choreographed lesson. The fight between Nutcracker and the Mouse King is not fantasy. It is a rehearsal of war, a rehearsal of obedience. Children watch tiny soldiers march in precise lines, armies clash on stage, and the Mouse King fall. They learn to fear chaos and respect hierarchy without ever hearing the word discipline. Hoffmann's original tale was harsher. Toys bled, toys fell apart, toys obeyed only under threat. The ballet hides this under elegant music and glittering sets. But the underlying story remains. Authority is absolute. Disobedience is punished. Violence is justified when it restores order. Every pirouette of the Nutcracker Prince is a statement. Follow commands, endure fear, survive. The audience applauds, parents smile, children giggle. Yet beneath the surface, the story carries the memory of 19th century Europe, of war, disease, and loss, encoded in gestures and music. The Nutcracker teaches without words, rehearses obedience, and normalizes hierarchy. What appears as a whimsical holiday tale is in truth a shadowed manual for understanding power, submission, and the cost of survival in a world shaped by fear. The gifts in the land of sweets are not merely treats for the eyes. Each candy, each sparkling decoration, each golden platter carries a hidden message. The story disguises lessons about power, reward, and hierarchy under sugar and music. Clara's journey through the kingdom is a carefully controlled path. She observes, admires, and understands that beauty is granted by authority, not earned through challenge or rebellion. Hoffman's original vision was harsher. The sweets were not soft confections, but symbols of survival, tokens earned through obedience and courage in the face of chaos. When the Mouse King falls, it is not because of magic or innocence. It is because rules were followed, strategies executed, authority respected. Every dance, every march, every song communicates the same lesson. To succeed, one must recognize power and accept its demands. Later adaptations, with Tchaikovsky's music and Dumas' edits, transformed these symbols into pleasure and wonder. The horrors were softened, the discipline masked. Yet the story's architecture remains. The treasures are not simply rewards. They are reminders of who controls the world, how order is maintained, and how those who observe carefully may benefit without challenging the system. The Nutcracker's sweetness is a lesson disguised as delight. What seems like joy and magic is really a story of survival, strategy, and the quiet power of those who understand the rules.